Using Literature to Influence Learning and Meet Students' Needs by Kelsey Whipple, Catherine Young, Cassandra Moulton, and Jennifer Ibarra. Narrated by Kelsey Whipple. In our presentation, we will discuss the background knowledge for our research, the methods of research used in our study, and our findings. The guiding questions for our research were: what type of literature do teachers use when working with social and behavior issues? And how do teachers use children's literature to guide students' learning? The background knowledge for our research was based on our combined literature reviews. Our literature reviews were about types of children's literature, engaging and motivating students using literature, and bibliotherapy. When using literature in the classrooms, teachers incorporate it for three main purposes. Academic skills would include content knowledge, comprehension, and language skills. The second purpose is entertainment, which is when students read for enjoyment. The third use is social and behavioral skills. This is when teachers focus on teaching students how to act and react in certain situations. When selecting books to use with students, teachers should start with concept books. Concept books expand children's understanding of an idea, relationship, or theme. For example, in kindergarten, teachers use concept books to teach things like the colors and how to raise your hand if you want to speak. After concept books, teachers can move on to issue books. Issue books focus on more complex and controversial topics, such as bullying or a death in the family. Reading to children is an important part of using literature in the classroom. Fictional children's books are the most common type of literature used. Teachers should start by previewing the book and its pictures, and then move on to the words and content of the story. Pre-reading and post-reading activities strengthen the learning experience for students as well. According to Mem Fox, an educational specialist in literacy, when we read aloud to young children, they gain a vast amount of general knowledge, especially when they listen to stories that they are unable to read by themselves. Whether students need to be read to or are able to read independently, it is important for them to enjoy the experience of reading. Fox also stated, "The more expressively we read, the more fantastic the experience will be. The more fantastic the experience, the more our kids will love books, and the more they'll pretend to read. And the more they pretend to read, the quicker they'll learn to read." How to make reading useful and engaging to students? First, teachers must create and use activities that can be connected to real-life experiences. Secondly, activate students' background knowledge before, during, and after reading. And third, teachers must support their students fully and believe they can read well. According to Angela McRae, an educational psychologist, for situations where students have little or no existing background knowledge, hands-on activities help to bring personal experience of a new concept to the class. Using background knowledge creates an engaging and motivating experience for children. Teachers' goals of using literature with their students should include helping them to comprehend materials, think critically, and to spark students' curiosity by adding to and reconstructing prior knowledge of the materials. In order for students to use literature effectively, they must develop their language skills. Spoken language relates to how students listen and speak. These are the skills that students develop first. Then, students develop their written language skills. The input of written language is reading, and the output is writing. All four of the language skills are equally important to students' academic success. Literature can be integrated into any subject area. Incorporating music adds emotion into the literature. The visual arts, such as painting, give students an opportunity to express what they learned from the literature. In science, literature is most often an instructional tool. It emphasizes lecture topics and can be a reference point for students. Literature can be used with science when combining observations of real-world, record-keeping, experiments, and other hands-on science activities with literature. Using literature in social studies allows students to connect with the characters from past and present and better understand their lives. Students can picture themselves in a time period or specific event, which increases the connection between the student and the content. When teachers use literature to help students solve problems, it is called bibliotherapy. Stephanie Kurtz defines bibliotherapy as a method of using literature to help students understand themselves and cope with problems relevant to their personal situations and developmental needs. It is important for teachers to select books about characters that are experiencing the conditions that the student is living through. The Berenstain Bears and the Trouble with Friends by Stan and Jan Berenstain is an example of a book that teachers could use with students who are struggling with friendships and resolving conflicts. In the school setting, there are three main people that use bibliotherapy with students. The first is the counselor. Counselors are ideal facilitators for discussion of stories since they have professional skills in active listening, clarification of content, and reflection of feeling. The second person that facilitates bibliotherapy is the librarian. The librarians need to be aware of all issues in their school because they will need to either secure literature for the library that is useful for a particular skill or problem, or pull books that will be useful to the teacher in their lessons. The third person involved in bibliotherapy is the teacher. As teachers educate students on skills using bibliotherapy, they too learn about this topic and face their own insecurities. Teachers are most often the ones implementing the lessons over the books. Developmental bibliotherapy is the type of bibliotherapy most often used by teachers. The common goal of developmental bibliotherapy is to facilitate normal development and to educate students about the attitudes, feelings, and behaviors, such as bullying or divorce. Developmental bibliotherapy involves 3 stages. The first is identification. This is when the student affiliates themselves with a character, either real or fictional. The second stage is catharsis. Catharsis is when the student begins to relate events from their own life to the book. The final stage is insight. This is when the student evaluates the relationship they have built with the character. There are 3 common strategies for implementing bibliotherapy. The first is to use guided discussions. This is when the teacher leads a discussion with the students to help make connections between the character and the child. The second strategy is to zone in on the coping strategies and themes that are presented in the book. This helps students to identify important information. The last common strategy is to use literature circles. This is beneficial because students can read, discuss, and relate with the other students in the group. Bibliotherapy involves a 10-step model for implementation and success. The first step is to develop a rapport, trust, and confidence with the student in need. Step 2 is to identify other school officials who can help the teacher in the process, like the counselor. Step 3 is to solicit support from the student's parents. Next, the teacher must define the specific problem that the student is experiencing. Step 5 is to create goals and activities to address the problem. And then, in Step 6, select books that are appropriate for the situation. They need to match the problem and the instructional level of the student. Step 7 is to introduce the book to the student. Step 8 is to incorporate reading strategies while reading. Step 9, the teacher must implement post-reading strategies that focus on relating the story to the student. And last, the teacher must evaluate the effects of bibliotherapy on the target student. Bibliotherapy can be extremely beneficial to students. It can lead to less physical violence in the classroom, less name-calling, fewer put-downs, improved conflict resolution strategies, increased sensitivity to peers, and increased ability to listen to peers. Bibliotherapy helps students to develop a sense of self-awareness and empathy for everyone who is involved. Along with the benefits, teachers should keep in mind the goals when implementing bibliotherapy. They are to provide information to students, to deliver insight on a specific experience, to give students replacement solutions to a problem, to stimulate discussion about real problems, and to link new values and attitudes with regard to the issue at hand. If a teacher can meet any one of these goals, bibliotherapy can be effective. The teacher benefits because when teachers are involved in the process, they become role models for students and help connect the content of books to real life. All of this information was the background knowledge for our research study. The research study was comprised of methods, results, and our conclusions. First, the methods. The design for our study consisted of 4 teacher interviews. There were 5 open-ended interview questions. We also gathered data from a survey that included 14 close-ended questions and 4 open-ended questions. Throughout our study, we assumed that all of the teachers were passionate about literature and were open and honest with their responses on the survey questionnaire. It was also assumed that the teachers use literature as a daily tool in their classroom. We defined 4 terms. The first is children's literature. This can be defined as the body of written works and accompanying illustrations produced in order to entertain or instruct young people. The genre encompasses a wide range of works, including acknowledged classics of world literature, picture books, and easy-to-read stories written exclusively for children, fairy tales, lullabies, fables, folktales, and other primarily orally transmitted materials. The second term, behavior problem, is defined as a symptomatic expression of emotional or interpersonal maladjustment, especially in children. Learning can be defined as the activity or process of gaining knowledge or skill by studying, practicing, being taught, or experiencing something. our last term is social communication. It is defined as the synergistic emergence of social interaction, social cognition, pragmatics, verbal and nonverbal, and receptive and expressive language processing. The population for our survey consisted of 16 teachers from Midwest urban elementary schools. The population for our interviews consisted of 4 teachers, including 1 kindergarten, 1 second grade, 1 fourth grade teacher, and 1 behavior specialist from urban elementary schools. All of the teachers in the study are currently employed. After conducting our interviews and collecting the surveys, we analyzed the results. During our study, we ran into 4 major limitations. The first was the amount of time allotted to conduct our research. The second was the lack of response from teachers. The third limitation was district protocol. We had planned to distribute our survey in a suburbia school district. However, due to the proximity to spring break and the district's protocol on surveys, we were unable to do so. The last major limitation was NISA testing. State testing limited the amount of time in the teacher's day for recorded interviews. Our interviews instead took place during quiet student activities over multiple days. Results. Graphs were created to represent the outcomes of each of the close-ended survey questions. Open-ended questions were analyzed for similarities and emerging themes. The first question on our survey was, which genres do your students like to read? As seen on the graph, students enjoy reading picture books, and nonfiction books come in a close second. According to the teachers, very few of their students enjoy graphic novels. Do you encourage your students to explore different genres? 100% of the surveyed teachers answered yes, they do. When asked, does your school have a reading specialist? More teachers answered that no, they do not have access to one. The fourth question was, how important do you feel the role of literature is in students' learning? All of the responses except for one were rated as very important. The other rating was as important. Our fifth question, how often do you notice social communication negatively affecting your classroom, showed a 3-way split at 25% each for 1 to 3 times a day, 1 to 3 times a week, and 1 to 3 times a month. With one teacher leaving this question blank, the leftover 18% answer that social communication never affects their classroom. For how often do you read aloud to your students, 75% of the teachers answered daily, and the other 25% answered weekly. This shows that teachers are using literature in their classroom at least once a week. We then asked the teachers what grade level they teach. We compiled our data and found that we have 6 kindergarten teachers, 4 second grade, 1 third grade, 1 fourth grade, 1 sixth grade, and 3 special education teachers. When asked, what is the most fun subject for you to teach, most of the teachers answered reading and math. None of the teachers answered spelling, and only one teacher enjoys social studies. The access level of the students to books ranges from 7 to 10, with 10 representing unlimited access to books. Although the teachers work with students from low economic status homes, the students have adequate access to literature outside of the classroom. 100% of the teachers surveyed feel that ebooks are useful or very useful to students in the classroom. As we move further into the 21st century, it will be important for teachers to incorporate technology into their room. Reading was the top subject that teachers incorporate literature in the most in their classroom. Social studies, science, and writing are other areas in which literature is incorporated the most. All of the teachers noted that they ask review questions to check for understanding after reading. Examples of review questions include those related to comprehension. Also, 100% of the teachers noted that their students seem engaged when they use literature in the classroom. While analyzing responses to the open-ended questions, the researchers noted 3 themes that emerged. The first is students' understanding, the second is bibliotherapy, and the third theme is the development of literacy skills. The themes emerged from these questions. Please take a moment to read them. With the theme of student understanding, participants spoke about checking for student understanding before, during, and after the lesson. Teachers check for understanding through class discussions, elbow partners, classroom activities, and assessments. Having them turn and discuss with a partner, having them draw their visualizations while I read, having them sequence a story while I read, using reciprocal teaching while I read, having them write a journal entry after the story, having them rate the story after we finish, etc. The above quote is one teacher's response for how she incorporates activities and checks for understanding throughout her lessons. Her response was based on the question, how do you involve your children with the stories you read? I asked them character names. I asked them what types of animals, colors, shapes, and feelings the people had in the book. Although the above quote is from a primary level teacher, it shows that checking for student understanding is important, even at the earliest stages of reading. When asked, what type of review questions do you ask your students, one teacher answered, higher level thinking questions. Questions that make them think deep into the characters. Questions over author's purpose. These type of questions force students to think past summarizing the story. Students must interpret the meaning behind the story and apply their own opinions to the stories. With a theme of bibliotherapy, participants spoke about using books when working with students on social skills and target behaviors. The behavioral specialist discusses how she would use literature with the children that she works with, and she describes, I would read a selected story with a child in session based on the presenting concern, and then have a conversation about the character and how the character is similar to them. We would then discuss how the character solved the problem and how they can use the same strategy to solve their problem. The importance of her quote is that she describes the entire process of bibliotherapy. She works with her patients to form a connection and thinks of positive ways to solve the problem. Generally, children's picture books show a good arc in character development, and specifically how the character goes from acting a certain way or believing a certain thing, and then comes to understand a better way of dealing with the situation. In the same way, you can use picture books to discuss social issues in a way that students are better able to understand certain concepts because they can understand the issue at the appropriate level for them. A second grade teacher noted that most picture books show a good arc in character development. This is important because teachers do not need to seek out specific types of books. They can use any book that relates to the issue at hand and the developmental level of the student. I often use the Help Me Be Good series to help with some of the social situations that arise in kindergarten, really in any grade. I let the students share text-to-self situations as needed. This kindergarten teacher does not focus on how to use books, but instead on specific books that she uses in her classroom. Similar series include the Llama Llama books and books written by Julia Cook. The development of literacy through reading, writing, and discussing the world of books and the written language is a theme that emerged from our results. Reading books is a powerful way to start the foundation of literacy. Literacy development doesn't appear magically. It is part of a social process through children's relationships with their parents, siblings, teachers, grandparents, and caretakers. Students are in guided reading groups and learn at their own level. Between one reading rotation every day, we have a buddy reading time. Students buddy read sitting elbow to elbow and knee to knee and read. They look forward to this buddy reading time. They can also pull out their zippy book bags from their seat sack anytime they get done with an assignment and read while others are still working. Other than that, on Fridays, when they check out new books from our classroom library, they get to sit and read for bell work. Through this quote, we see a variety of ways to get students engaged and excited about reading. If students are not excited about reading, they will not develop the literacy skills necessary to be successful. If we are introducing a new concept, whether it be math, science, social studies, or any subject area really, I often use nonfiction books to support learning, especially at the beginning of a unit. I also like to have a mini library on the concepts accessible to students, which they can access during their free time. Making books accessible to students sets up the foundation for the development of literacy skills. When students have access to books, they have the opportunity and the choice to open the books and explore. You have to look at the student's interest, especially at a school with low SES. If you can relate your literature that is selected to literature that students enjoy and can relate to, it makes them more willing to want to try their best and enjoy the learning. In order to develop the literacy skills, students need to be motivated and want to learn. When reading is made out to be passionate and engaging experience, students are more likely to put effort into it and want to get better. In conclusion, it was the intent of the researchers to explore literature strategies and techniques used by teachers in elementary school settings. The researchers discovered that all the teachers who were surveyed and interviewed use literature in their classroom for a purpose that is related to one of the three emerging themes. They are working to give students the literacy skills they need to be successful. Although a small percentage of the teachers use the library as a resource for themselves, it provides students with a source to find books on a genre or topic of interest. Books are a resource for students and teachers alike. They create lifelong readers and help students to find connections between themselves and the characters in the book. Literature is a resource that teachers can use to help students and meet their needs, socially, academically, and behaviorally.